Hey everyone, Sombre here. This will be another of my videos for Dominions 5, Warriors of the Faith, looking at one of the nations in the Sombre Warhammer mod. I'll be looking at Tilea today, and as this is just an overview, it's not really a guide to playing the nation. I'm not going to go too much into expansion strategies or what spells you can cast, things like that. We're just going to look at the nation overall, the recruitable troops that you get, the commanders, any heroes and multi-heroes, and for Tilea there's a special thing. We'll go into the Regiments of Renown, and we'll also have a quick look at which pretenders are available to them, and some thoughts about what scales you might want to take. Like the other Warhammer nations, Tilea, Dogs of War, are a Middle Era nation. Their race consists of humans. They prefer to have a coastal start, so where possible the map will put you on a coastal start, but it's not always possible. Their military is made up of mercenary infantry and cavalry with reduced resource and recruitment point costs, which you'll see when we're looking at the troops. And they have powerful, unique regiments of renown that they can recruit, and I will cover those after we've talked about the commanders. They have access to most paths. They have fantastic magical variety and diversity, but it is quite expensive. Their priests are weak and few in number, but they do have the benefit that they have a 5% flat extra gold income across all of their provinces. That's because of them being a master trader nation. And they also have a further extra 20% gold in any coastal fort. So you'll be looking to build coastal forts to get that extra gold if you can. Their mechanics are, well, special mechanics for this nation now that they have a randomized mage you can recruit, which is here, the college mode contract, and they have the Regiment of Renown contracts that you can recruit, which is here, the mercenary contract. Their forts are standard. For anyone who isn't familiar, Tilea is a fairly minor power in the Warhammer world. They never really got very many miniatures and things for the tabletop. They did get this release called Dogs of War, where there were various different unique mercenary regiments and things. And they've always had a little bit of support, but they're basically the Warhammer version of Italy during its time when it was warring city-states that used a lot of mercenary forces, for better or ill in history. So it's kind of a 90s Warhammer kind of parody take of Italy during that period. In terms of their starting sites and gem income, they have the Society of Sorceresses, which gives them an astral, a nature, and an air, so quite a diverse set of gems there, and gives them recruitment of the Tilean Sorceress, that's their capital only mage. And then they have the Temple of Myrmidia that gives them one fire and one earth, so a really broad selection of gems, and gives them their capital only sacred troop and their capital only sacred commander, their priest commander. So let's crack on with the recruitable units. Now, as mentioned in the national summary, their recruitable units tend to have lowered resource cost over what you would expect based on their equipment, and they tend to have a lowered recruitment point cost. So you don't have to worry so much as you normally would about which province, whether you're going to have enough resources, and it enables you to amass troops a bit more quickly, but you do have to pay a premium in the gold cost of the units typically. And this just represents that they are mercenaries. So let's look at the first of them, the pikemen. So you have a gold cost of 12 as opposed to the usual 10 that you might be paying for a pikeman like this. They have pretty standard human stats. They've got fairly decent protection, but not great, an iron cap and a chainmail cuirass. So I would say that's kind of light to medium armor, maybe a bit medium armor. It's not really enough to stand up to crossbows and ranged fire particularly well. They don't have a shield, but the pike is a pretty good weapon. It allows you to repel. It has an okay damage output because it's a two-handed weapon, so 17 piercing damage can get through some pretty tough armor. It's good against medium to heavy armor, because piercing, of course, reduces the opponent's protection score a bit. And they do have formation fighter, so you can fit 4 of them into a square, and 4 pikes in a square. It doesn't really give you a bonus to your chance to repel things. Well, it kind of does it indirectly in that you are less likely to be the person being attacked when someone attacks the square, so you won't end up getting harassed down too much. But you can repel things okay, and by outputting 4 pike attacks per square, they're actually fairly killy. So I would say that the pikemen are definitely worth recruiting. You can see that considering this set of equipment they'd have, you would expect their resources to be much higher. This maybe 15 or something like that, and their recruitment points would typically be 9, 10, something like that. So we're kind of looking at like half the recruitment points you have to pay, and then less than half the resources you'll have to pay over normal. But of course, there is a gold premium on them. So pikemen, I would say, well worth having these. They're good line holders, but you may find that you favour the infantry you get through the Regiments of Renown system, which we'll get to later. Your other staple troop is the crossbowman. So same thing, you pay a bit extra gold, but you pay less in terms of resources and recruitment points. You get a perfectly competent crossbowman with normal human stats. He does not have particularly good protection, but protection 9 is enough to keep you around. So similar to independent crossbowmen, but easy to mass. They work fantastically well with flaming arrows because you can mass them up, and crossbows are already pretty good. But they do cost that extra bit of gold. Not really very much to say about them. They do have a little bonus here because Tilea is really the land of the crossbow in Warhammer. They absolutely love crossbows there, so they get this extra bit of precision here to represent that. Yeah, no good at all in melee combat because they've only got a dagger and terrible protection. But at range, pretty serviceable. And you can recruit these in any fort. None of these are recruit anywhere, I believe. Next in the lineup is the Sartosan Pirate. So very similar human stats, although they have a bit extra attack skill and defense skill because they're a bit more experienced fighters and more ferocious fighters. They have ambidextrous. They have 2 weapons, the Falchion and the short sword. Pretty decent damage output and pretty good stats on those. They got one at attack 11 and one at attack 12. The downside to them, they've got 2 problems with them basically. One is that they have very bad morale. They're not really very steely-hearted guys. They're likely to run off if things get bad. And they also just don't have very good protection. And that can be particularly bad if they're under missile fire because they don't have shields. Even short bows will absolutely just piece these guys up and you'll lose quite a few of them. So you have to be careful with that. But in close combat, their damage output is pretty good. They are, 2 attack infantry are always nice because that's 6 attacks per square. And they do come with Pillager, which is situationally useful. So you can make a little bit of use of Sartosan Pirates. And of course, their recruitment cost and resource cost is low. It's pretty much just gold. But I would say that generally speaking, I would take the Pikemen happily over taking the Sartosan Pirates. Under some circumstances where I just need massive output of attacks, then I would take the Sartosan Pirates. And the fact that they can hit with the Falchion quite hard is pretty nice. Moving on to the Estalian Almagaver. Now we're starting to see some slightly more elite stats. So we've got strength 12, hit points 12, morale 12, attack skill 11, and defense skill base 11. So pretty good stats for a kind of a veteran or elite infantry. Their equipment is not fantastic though. They have the basic spear, so they have a bit of a problem with damage output. Even with that good strength, the spear does have pretty low damage, so if your opponents have a lot of armor, that's not going to be great. But they can do pretty good damage with their javelin. Strength 12 javelins are always nice to have, and they do have precision 12, so they're nice and accurate with them at closer ranges particularly. They are quite expensive though, at 14 gold, but I would say you're not really paying a massive premium considering what you're getting here, and considering that their resource cost and recruitment point cost are of course very low. In terms of protection, they have pretty standard light to medium infantry protection. I guess medium you would call that. And they have a shield, so they can stand up a bit more to missile fire than some other stuff. The real benefit of the Almagavers is that they are stealthy troops. And they are pretty, it's okay stealth. If you have your stealthy commander, they do have a certain commander who can lead them around. You can do some good raiding with these guys because they are perfectly capable of beating up province defense. They have, shields to defend themselves against the ranged attacks, and they have good enough, spear and javelin guys. They can take out some province defense. So I would say useful for that. They're kind of comparable with like some of the Roman Legionnaire things from Dominions, that or Pythium have. So Almagaver is definitely worth considering, I would say. Then we have the Swordsman, which is also 14 gold, also has pretty good stats, but he doesn't have as many hit points or as much strength or as much morale as the Almagavers. So a bit less of an elite troop, but his equipment is definitely better. Doesn't have a javelin, but has a broadsword, and broadswords are pretty good. 16 damage is decent, and attacking at 12 is obviously very nice. And then the protection's pretty good. Half helmet, chainmail cuirass, and a shield. They are relatively durable. These are your kind of your fancy lad infantry. They are getting a bit more up there in resource cost. The 8 is 2 more than the pikemen, so a lot of the time I would probably prefer the pikemen against certain enemies at least. But they are a little bit more durable and they're better at chopping up more lightly armored guys than the pikemen are. And of course, against missile fire, the shield makes them more durable. No formation fighter though. Then we have the Arabian Nomad Warrior. Arabian Nomad Warriors are basically best thought of as hybrid infantry. They've got the composite bow, and then they've also got 2 attacks in close combat. The shield spike is a not very strong attack. That's kind of them hitting somebody with the spike on their shield. Doesn't do very much damage, but it is a piercing attack. And they have the scimitar, which is kind of comparable with a broadsword, really. It doesn't have the extra defense of a broadsword, but it's still pretty good, and the damage is pretty good from a scimitar. So they can definitely handle things in melee, but they are also a good way of fielding composite bows. I generally find that I would prefer to have crossbows for my ranged units and pelt people with those, but these guys are much, much better at handling themselves in melee, so if you are worried about that, then they're great to use for that. They do come with Wasteland Survival and Pillager, so again, another one of these niche units you can use for pillaging, but they are quite expensive in terms of gold. 16 as opposed to 12 for the crossbow, so often I would take the crossbow over these guys, but they are nice because of that dual functionality they have. And the shield can kind of it's good enough that it'll keep them a little bit more a little bit less pin cushioned with arrows in archer duels and things. They do, however, have low protection. This protection is not good, and so they will get chopped up if they're in extended exposure to attacks, and extended exposure to cavalry, things like that. But yeah, two attacks in close combat can be surprisingly strong. Moving on to the Dwarf Warrior, which is kind of heavy infantry, and these guys are limited recruitment. I believe they're limited to 5 per turn. They also cost significantly more in resources than you would expect. I think I'll add a descriptive thing here saying how many of them you're limited to per turn to the text description. But if we remember the dwarf national overview, I talked about clans dwarfs. These are very similar to basic clans dwarfs. They have a little less morale, I think, because they're a little bit less committed to, they're not fighting for their own nation, their own people. They're fighting for gold just as mercenaries. But they have similarly really good stats. So you have the elevated hit points, you have more strength, you have good attack skill. Your defense skill is not so hot at 10, but you do have the quality shield, quality chain halberd, half helmet. So nice equipment here that gives you very nice protection, 18 at the end of the day. You have elevated magic resistance at 13, good morale. They are slow though, of course, the combat speed problem that all dwarfs have. But they are very hard hitting. If you need something that hits hard, 19 slashing damage is no joke at 12 attack. They are formation fighters, so you get 4 of those output per square. Although remember, for formation fighter, it can make it harder to hold a line, form a line to catch flankers and things, because your infantry are more concentrated. They come with dark vision, which can be very useful because dwarfs, used to fighting underground. And they also have both siege bonus 1 and castle defense bonus 2. And for 20 gold, I would say pretty much a bargain. I usually get as many of the dwarf warriors as I can. It depends a little bit what my production scales are like, whether I'm slot up production. But having access to these as my heavy infantry, very nice. Not something I would use for expansion because of their increased resource cost. Moving on now to our last infantry, our sacred infantry can only be recruited at the capital, is the Myrmidian. So Myrmidians are very similar to some of the hoplite sacreds that are in the game. They're like the heart companions in the vanilla game. They have formation fighter, so you can fit 4 of these to a square. They have a patrol bonus, which is nice, although because they're quite expensive units, you perhaps don't want to be doing that much patrolling with them. But it can be useful if you just desperately need to patrol something out or get unrest down. They can be helpful for that. And crucially, they have Sun Ore. So Sun Ore just means that you have a morale check that is forced on the enemy in order to attack you, but it only happens if you are exposed to the sun. So only happens in battles that aren't in caves or if there hasn't been like a supernatural darkness or something cast. They are pretty decent medium infantry hoplites in combat. They have good protection, good magic resistance, 12 hit points is nice, excellent stats, attack skill base of 12, and then of course they have the Golden Spear, which means up to attack 13 on their attacks. Their defense skill starts at 12, and then they've got a pretty nice shield in the form of the Golden Shield, very high protection on it. So they are tough, durable, they'll stay alive. And their damage output, while it's not particularly high, they would benefit from a bless that increases their strength, that is for sure. But it's pretty decent. The problem with the Myrmidian really is that it just costs a lot of resources and recruitment points. The recruitment points are less of an issue though. The resource cost of 32. If you think about that in terms of your pikemen, that is equivalent to 5 of your pikemen in terms of resource cost, plus a little bit more. So these can really be a resource bottleneck for you, getting Myrmidians. But they do give you access to a very reliable medium infantry with the right bless. They're very nice. They can be very, very tough. They can deal decent damage. They have magic weapons, which are a very exciting thing to have access to natively on a recruitable unit. They can help you deal with ethereal, invulnerable, etc. magic and things like that. Mist form they can help pop as well. They're not that expensive. 30 gold is, I think, perfectly reasonable for this. So a decent sacred, but remember that it's capital only, so you probably don't want to blow a massive bless on it or anything like that, and it is resource restricted. But I like to get as many of these as I can, and I find them very useful. Now, a unit which has recently been increasing cost because it was a little bit too good is the Freelancer. Freelancers are basically a knight, but with a drastically lowered resource cost and recruitment points cost. This is much lower than you would typically be paying for noble heavy cavalry. They are a bit more expensive though. A knight like this, maybe with even slightly better stats, would usually cost 35 gold, I believe. If you look at like the Knights of Man, or maybe 30 gold if it had similar stats. Their stats aren't bad. 11 hit points, strength 11. Their morale is not particularly great. But they are wearing excellent armor. Protection 21 is crazy good. So they're super heavy cavalry in terms of their protection, just not so much in terms of their stats. Their damage output's okay, 17-point swing from the broadsword, and a hoof attack as well, of course. And then they have the lance. So on the charge, very, very high damage output, but once they're actually in combat, their damage is okay. They have a kite shield, they have excellent armor, so very durable. Yeah, just a very nice unit. I get plenty of these. People have previously been using them to do expansion things, but with the slightly increased cost of the freelancers, maybe that's not going to be so viable anymore. But heavy cavalry in Dominions 5 certainly are just good in general, and the freelancers a pretty good generic heavy cavalry with one thing taking it outside of being generic, which is just that it has superb protection for this resource cost. 26 resources and you're coming out with this massive thick full plate. This is because they are basically mercenaries hired down from the Empire where they make this crazy strong full plate and the like. So that's your recruitables. You can see quite an eclectic bunch. You have access to pretty good heavy infantry. You have access to good sacred medium infantry. You have really nice super heavy protection cavalry. And then you've got, pretty decent damage dealers, repel troops, and so on. So quite a nice selection, not massive. The selection of infantry you get for some of the other Warhammer nations is a bit bigger, but a pretty decent bit of diversity there. And you get a lot of your other troop diversity from the mercenary contracts, which we will talk about in a little bit. But first, let's go through the commanders. And I'm going to skip over the college-made contracts until the end. We'll talk about it there. And the mercenary contract I'll talk about after I have talked about all of the other commanders as well. So first off, you have your scout. It's a basic scout. Not much else to say about that. Then you have the assassin. It's nice to have national access to an assassin. He has full slots. He only takes 1 commander point, so you can spam these assassins. He is a sailing assassin, so he has more ability to get around than most assassins do. And other than that, he is an assassin. He is basically the same assassin that Marignon has in the base game. He has decent attacks up close, short sword and poison dagger, and he has a crossbow. I wouldn't really recommend sending him with orders to fire his crossbow in assassinations. I would say have him charge in an attack, or even better, be using one of these misc item slots. It may turn out that having an assassin for 1 recruitment point, even though that's a thing in the vanilla game, is a little bit too good on Tilea. We'll have to keep an eye on how that works out in terms of balance, how annoying they are. So having access to an assassin, very nice. The captain is your basic commander. He has 40 leadership. He is not particularly expensive in terms of resources and gold, but not really cheap. He's kind of like an indie commander. Nothing particularly exciting about him. This is kind of a disadvantage. They don't have a particularly good basic commander. You can see he's got the Unsurrounded 1 trait because I like to make commanders have some extra hit points and a bit of unsurroundable and extra magic resistance. That's typically what I do in Warhammer Nations. And he's got pretty good equipment. He's got a crossbow, so you can have him just sit back and fire that and not risk his life in melee combat. But he'd do okay in melee combat. He just, he's not that good. Then you have the Estalian Almacardan, which is the leader of the Almagavers. The Almacardan is basically there just to lead Almagavers around. He is a stealthy commander. He leads 40 of them. He's quite expensive for what he is, but he does give you access to that stealthy commander to lead those troops around, and that's what he's for. So you may want to do some of those, but it is quite expensive. Then you have the General. The General is your 80 leadership commander, so getting into the more competent regions of commanders. He is mounted, he has very good equipment, he has unsurroundable too, so he's okay, he can do a bit of melee combat. You could have these guys leading freelancers around, and maybe charging into battle with some freelancer bodyguards and doing a bit of fighting. Yeah, there's your General. Not much else to say about these guys. You can see that these kind of commanders are not really a big strength of Tilea. Moving on to a slightly different commander, the Privateer Captain. So the Privateer Captain is interesting for two reasons. Number one, he gives you access to a sailing commander, so he can bring a bunch of troops around on his boat. He can do max size 3, so he can fit cavalry on his boat as well. You can use him to get extra maneuverability. If you are near water and you do prefer a coastal start, then these guys can be very useful for getting around some difficulties moving around, maybe raiding people, things like that. The other thing about the Privateer Captain is that he costs 150 gold, but he does come with 10 Sartosan pirates for free. Then his upkeep is lower to that of a 70 gold commander. So by hiring the Privateer Captain, you get to, for 7 resources, get a commander who has sailing and also a bunch of pirates. However, he does cost 2 recruitment points. That is all not true of the General and not true of these other things we've looked at so far. Yeah, so we're moving into you wouldn't be recruiting a massive number of these just because you want to be using those recruitment points probably to get mages, but he can be useful just to get a sailing commander and, of course, give you those troops. Early on, maybe you would be able to use those for expansion. I don't know. I'm not sure it would be a great idea. You have a level 1 priest. Not much to say about him. He's an indie priest, basically. Not very exciting. Then you have, I'm actually going to skip over this mage for the moment and just go to the Myrmidian Priestess. So this is a capital-only priest you can recruit. She is very similar to the Myrmidian infantry. She has the magic weapon, she has the magic armor and pretty good armor overall, so high protection. She is a level 2 priest and she has Sun Or 2. Could you thug with these? Maybe. They're also, I mean, I wouldn't really recommend it. They're more there to just kind of bless the Myrmidians and lead them around. They've got good leadership because they spend their lives studying tactics. They also give you siege bonus and cast defense bonus. So kind of an all-round really useful commander. But 110 gold for them nonetheless. I usually do get some of these. I thematically like them leading around the Myrmidians, and I like having a flexible commander that can do a bunch of things, and it's useful in sieges, siege defenses, etc. So I think pretty useful. Let's move on to the mages now. So, first up we have the Estalian Alchemists. They are alchemists. This means that they are better at converting magic gems to gold using magic rituals. So you can do that early on in the game when you just need gold to help supercharge your expansion, etc. That's actually not too bad. And they're relatively efficient as researchers because they have Adept Researcher +2. They're not that expensive. They're not sacred, so their upkeep's going to be a problem. But if you want to just get your research going early on, Estalian Alchemist is pretty good for it. They have Fire 1, Water 1, Earth 1, and then they have a random of Fire, Water, Earth, and Astral. So you will often end up with Fire 2s, Water 2s, Earth 2s, and of course having Astral with these is good. Astral Earth is a good cross path. So yeah, pretty good mage basically. Don't try and use their acid flasks in battle, they're just there for flavour. If you have them running to the front lines throwing these and they get killed, that is your own fault. Then we have the capital only mage, the Tilean Sorceress. This is a pretty strong mage. This is 2 recruitment points, but 260 gold, but a kind of a premium mage with really nice magic paths. So we start off with an Astral 1 and a Nature 1, but then random we have an Elemental path +2, so linked random, so you always get Earth 2, Water 2, Air 2, or Fire 2. The Air 2 in particular is exciting because you cannot get that on your Alchemists, and because obviously Air 2 is just very good. Then you also have a +1 in Astral and Nature or Death. The Death one is the least interesting of those, but at least it does give you access to some Death. And of course you can get Death Air, which is an interesting cross path. but you also can obviously get up to Astral 2 and Nature 2 here. So yeah, very strong. They have Disease Healer, which can be useful. They have Fortune Teller 10, which is useful if you have them in your capital. They can protect you from bad events in your capital. So a strong mage overall. I really like the sprite that they ended up with as well. They look cool. Then we have two special types of commander. The first of these is the College Mage Contract. So you can see here that this diagram consists of 8 different symbols. They are the symbols for the 8 winds of magic, and each of these corresponds to a wizard which you can recruit as a mercenary from the Empire to the north. I don't think, no, I haven't done any Empire videos yet, but I will at some point, and you will see that the Empire can natively recruit all of these mages. When you recruit this commander, though, you get a random one of the college mages. You have to have at least one province defense in the province for this to happen, otherwise the contract will sit there until you do have one province defense. That is to, well, there's various reasons for that, but you don't need to worry about those. But for the most part, you get one province defense in your province, you hire a college mage contract, you get a random mage. What random mages do you get? There's 8 different types, and they can be found here in this preview site. Mercenary college mages. So these are the sites. It says they're not available from the start, but might appear later on. That is not true. They will not appear later on. They're just there so that on this page, the national overview page, you can preview things your nation can get, and that's how I like to do it for my mods. So here you can see the mercenary college mages. Here they are. I'm just going to go through these quick and just show you their paths and not really go too much into what they're like. So the Bright Wizard is a combat caster. He casts Phoenix Power automatically at the battle start. So in battle they are Fire 3. The Grey Wizard is stealthy and he is a spy. He has Air 2 and then he has either Astral 1 or Death 1. The Celestial Wizard has Air 1, Astral 1 and then either Air or Astral. So he's Air 2 Astral 1 or a Air 1 Astral 2. He has Fortune Teller and he is a very good researcher as well as being shock resistant. The Amethyst Wizard has Death 2 Astral 1 and is a pretty good researcher. The Light Wizard has Astral 2 Fire 1 and is a pretty good researcher. He also has this that can burn undead and demons as a ranged weapon, so you can blast away with that when he's not using his magic. The Jade Wizard gives you access to Disease Healer as well. It's not so exciting for you because you've already got it on the Sorceress, but he does give you Water 1, Nature 1, and then either Air or Earth 1. The Gold Wizard gives you a Forge bonus. That's quite an exciting thing to have. It's only of 1, but still, Forge bonus 1 is nice for making various different items. He has Earth 2 and he has Fire 1, so you can forge some pretty nice things with him at a little bit of a discount. And that, of course, stacks with the Dwarven Hammer. The Amber Wizard has Earth 1, Nature 2, and then he has Animal Law. He's a Beastmaster, so he can lead animals around more effectively. And he has a bunch of survivals. And he's also a bit tougher in close combat, not that you really want to do that with him. So you get one of these wizards at random. You can see you end up with a massive variety of different things. There it is random, so you don't get to pick what you're having. But you do have this big diversity of magic. So overall, we can say that Tilea's got pretty great mage diversity. You know, its magic path selection is fantastic because it's got, astral, air, death, fire, nature, water, air. I think I might have said air twice, but it is that good. And it's got this through the College Mage contract. The Alchemists give you fairly good diversity in site searching and a research base as well. And then Sorceresses, which you'll want tons of because they're kind of your premier mage. And they also have an excellent selection. I find with Tilea that you may have a difficulty in focusing your research because you don't really know what paths you're going to get. It's kind of random. You know, even here we've got the linked randoms. That's going to greatly decide, how many of each of these you have is going to make a big difference to what research you might want to prioritize. And you don't know which college mages you're going to end up in or in what quantities. If you recruit enough of these, eventually you'll end up with all of them, but they are quite expensive. So high diversity and a bit unfocused and fairly expensive. These aren't sacred mages and they have a relatively high gold cost. So their upkeep gets to be quite big. So that's all of the commanders except for the mercenary contract, and I'm going to cover those after I talk about the heroes and multi-heroes. So as with my other Warhammer nations, you've got the preview sites here, you've got the multi-heroes, that is just the Tilean Sorceress, so they can turn up based on your luck scale. And then you've got the luck independent heroes, so these do not care what your luck scale is. Even if you've got misfortune 3, these guys can turn up. You've got these two linked at the top. This is Gotrek and Felix, two very famous characters in the Warhammer universe, and pretty badass too. I believe they always turn up in the same event together. So we've got Gotrek the Slayer, who has got various Slayer things, like a very nasty hard-hitting axe with 2 attacks. He has got the Mark of Drengi, so he's permanently got luck. He can go berserk. He's got lots of unsurroundable. He's got very good stats, very scary, hits incredibly hard, and with a magic weapon, as you can see, he's got fear, he's got invulnerability, very resistant to magic. His drawback really is hasn't got any magic, of course, and he's a little bit difficult to thug with. He's very good at killing big targets and things, but somewhat difficult to thug with because of his fairly low protection. Even with invulnerability 12, you will want to get his protection up higher, but he doesn't have that many slots you can do that with. So the stone boots would be a good idea there. Maybe just other things to increase his protection or increase his survivability would be a good idea. Then there's Felix Jaeger, or Jaeger, I guess it's Jaeger, the warrior poet, and he has got the Mark of Drengi as well, so he's also lucky, all the survival, similar to Gotrek, a bit more of a leader. He doesn't lead very many units, but he's got inspirational, and he's a pretty good fighter as well, good unsurroundable, good stats, and a very nice weapon with 2 attacks and armor piercing. So similar, nothing mind-blowing, but they are very nice warrior heroes to get. Then you've got your souped-up general. This is Borgio the Besieger, the Prince of Miragliano. So mounted general with better stats, better leadership, 120 instead of 80. And he comes with the monstrous helm, which gives him luck, some elemental resistances, and fear. He's got unsurroundability 3, he's got inspirational 1, so 120 leadership plus inspirational 1 plus siege bonus and cast defense bonus. Very much an army leader hero. You can do a little bit of light thugging with him, but he hasn't really got the slots for it. He does come with excellent protection built in because of his brazen armor and monstrous helm. Protection 23 to start off with, very nice. And pretty good defense skill too. He's also got a very nice hard-hitting 2 attacks Mace of Might. So yeah, the good built-in weapon. Then we have the Master Inventor. This is basically a Leonardo da Vinci parody, Leonardo di Miragliano. He's old. He has terrible stats. There's nothing particularly interesting about that. However, he is a very good researcher. He's a researcher who just gives you 30 research even though he doesn't have any magic paths. He is a mason, so he can upgrade your castles to 1 level higher, which is obviously very strong and something you will want him doing a lot of the time. If he's in a fort, he gives you a resource bonus of 50, which can help you recruit more troops quickly. So getting him somewhat early on is really nice for that. And he also gives you a lot of extra siege bonus and cast defense bonus. Finally, if you do have him battles, you want to keep him safe in the battles, keep him at the back and get him out of trouble, because he can't do anything useful in them, but he does cast Wind Guide automatically at the start of battle, which represents him doing the calculations for where that would be best for them to fire and get their precision up. Finally, we've got another general type hero, the first citizen of Lucini, Lorenzo Lupo. He's kind of a cosplayer for ancient Tilea back in its glory days, kind of an ancient Greece or ancient Roman style cosplayer. But he's also quite impressive. He's quite an athlete himself. He's got good stats. He's got inspiration on leadership 120, so another excellent general. And you can do a bit of thugging with him because he is sacred. So if you've taken a bless that works well with your Myrmidians, then he also has similar kind of stats and would benefit from similar things to the Myrmidians. But he also has Sun Ore like them, so it's much stronger though, Sun Ore 3. And unsurroundable. Yeah, you could do a bit of thugging with him, but basically another kind of cool thematic general. He does come with built-in quite high protection from the start, because it's good stuff. And he's got this armor-piercing magic weapon, which is good. It's only 1 attack, though, unlike Felix Jaeger's one. So those are your heroes. Now we need to talk about the signature mechanic of the nation, which is your powerful, unique Regiments of Renown. So the way you get these is that you recruit one of these mercenary contracts. They take 2 recruitment points, and they cost 320 gold. No resources, though. Well, 1 resource, but it doesn't really matter. Once you've paid that, then the next turn you will get a unique leader with a Regiment of Renown. These are randomly selected from the whole list of Regiments of Renown, but if you have gone through all of those, if they've all turned up once, then you can get a captain and some basic merc troops, which is not a very good deal. So basically, only use this while there are still Regiments of Renown, but there are quite a few of them. that you can have. I believe there's over 20 of them. I could check that, but anyway, I think there's around 20 of them, or a bit over 20. You must have at least one province defense in the province for this to happen, so do not recruit this if you know that you're just about to come back under siege in a fort, because you won't have the province defense, and this will just sit there doing nothing and not being very useful. But the contract will sit there until you do actually get the one province defense up, and then you will get your Regiment of Renown. So you get a random Regiment of Renown, and they are selected from this list. You can see the regiments that will turn up in these three preview sites, Regiments of Renown 1, 2, and 3. And the way this is formatted is it gives you the leader that you're going to get, and then the troop that you're going to get. And the number of troops that you'll get initially varies depending on how good those troops and that leader are. But it's basically just a fair amount of troops for the gold cost that you're paying. So you're paying 320 gold, so you need to get a reasonable number of troops. But there is a bit of a premium because these are kind of spicy mercenaries who want more gold. So the first regiment is Rico's Republican Guard. Here is Ragged Rico himself. He's a pretty good leader. He's got some other stats. I think I'll go through these fairly quickly, but I'll use Ragged Rico as an example of a captain and his mercenary unit. So you tend to get a leader who's pretty okay leader, nothing amazing, not like a national hero type strength, but pretty good, okay stats. Maybe you could do a bit of thugging with them. Maybe they'll have some small special abilities, like Ragged Rico reduces unrest a little bit, and has a bit of patrol bonus, a bit of cost defense bonus, so that's nice to have. But each of the leaders will also provide monthly reinforcements. So their gold cost is quite high. You don't have to pay that, obviously, you're just paying the upkeep, but it means they've got a somewhat high upkeep, but that upkeep then pays for monthly reinforcements. So each month you get one extra Republican Guardsman. That's one of the troops that come with Ragged Rico. So here they are, the Republican Guardsmen. Pretty good. They are kind of an elite heavy pikeman. Very good protection, good stats, excellent morale of 12, formation fighter, patrol bonus, cost defense. So very nice defensive, useful pikemen. I like to get these guys early on too. And you'll get one extra of these per month, but you'll also get your starting chunk of them. I don't know exactly how many it is Ragged Rico gets. I imagine something like maybe he gets like 15 of them or something like that, and then he gets one extra per month. I can show you an example after we've gone through all the Regiments of Renown of what happens when you buy one, just what it looks like. I'll just show a quick example of that. But let's go quickly through all the different Regiments of Renown you can get. So we've got Ragged Rico's Republican Guard. We've got the Alcatani Fellowship, which are led by Rodrigo Del Monte. He's another guy that reduces unrest and has inspirational and is a pretty great leader, well, a leader of a lot of guys, but doesn't give them the morale bonus or anything. He just leads lots of people and is inspirational. And he gets a monthly reinforcement of 4 eager Fellowship Pikemen. So the Fellowship Pikemen are kind of budget pikemen, not as good as Ragged Rico's, not as good as the pikemen that you'll recruit. They're kind of like pikemen militia in a way. Yeah, they don't have the best defensive skill. They've got kind of not great stats overall, but they do have a bit of morale and they do have a patrol bonus because they're used to dealing with raiders and bandits. Another pike unit is the Leopard Company, led by Leopoldo de Lucci. Here he is. And he gets, close the wrong thing, he gets 2 Leopard Company pikemen per month. Here is a Leopard Company pikeman. Pretty decent kind of a veteran pikeman. Then we have the Bearmen of Urslo, which are led by Bjorg Bearstruck. He is a werebear. He has good armor, so he ends up with very high protection. He's got some good stats. He's got invulnerability built into him, and he's got recuperation. So you can definitely turn him into a bit of a thug, but he doesn't really have the slots to be that exciting. But he's an example of one where you get a bit more of the strength is concentrated into the leader of the unit that you get. He gets a monthly reinforcements of 1 Marauder of the Bear, and here are the Marauders of the Bear. So pretty good, very high protection for kind of Chaos Marauder type people. And pretty good stats overall, very tough. It's kind of a good heavy infantry there. There is Wusong's Drunken Bandits, led by the tiger fighting hero Wusong. He is a crazy martial artist guy. I wouldn't necessarily use him for thugging, but he does actually have very high natural protection because he's developed a martial arts technique of making his skin as strong as stone. Oh, his muscle is as hard as iron, sorry. I should get that accurate. He gets 2 Drunken Bandits per month, and here are the Drunken Bandits. Kind of an okay light medium infantry. Then we have the Cursed Captain. These guys are interesting. The Cursed Company, led by Richter Kruger. Anything Richter Kruger kills in battle will come back as a Cursed Legionnaire. and he himself is immortal, or Dominion immortal, which is quite nice. He gets 2 Curse Companions per month. The Curse Companions themselves, whatever they kill, also comes back as a Curse Companion, and that includes anything that they've raised in the battle. So they can get out of hand quite quickly, but the majority of ones that are raised in battle do not get kept after the battle. Sometimes, very rarely, you get 1 or 2 of them stay after the battle, but basically they don't. But in battle, they can kind of work like a von Neumann machine, where they're like self-replicating by chopping stuff up. So they can get out of hand against numerous and weak enemies, like if you're fighting lots of monkeys, or if you're fighting militia, kind of stuff like that. They can get out of hand pretty quick. They're basically long dead. Then we have the Slayer Pirates, led by Long Drong. Here's Long Drong with his hook hand, his pirate parrot Polly, and his eye patch. He's a typical Slayer, so he's got slaying on his cutlass, which makes him good against big things. He's got Polly that runs around biting people with his beak. And he is a sailing commander, so he can be useful to take people off to coastal provinces. And he is lucky, built-in lucky, and a berserker from the Mark of Drengi. He gets 1 Slayer Pirate per month, and this is the Slayer Pirate. You'll notice this says Slayer Axe. Yeah, I think that's fine. They're cutlasses, they're not axes, but I couldn't be bothered to rename them. But I might do that in the future. So yeah, typical Slayers. You don't have to activate the tattoos on these guys, as it says here. They keep it constantly through active through communal drinking of incredibly potent grog and singing of sea shanties. So they've always got invulnerability built in, and they've got pretty good stats. Not great in terms of protection, but the invulnerability will keep them going for a bit. Then we have Voland's Venators. Voland's Venators are good quality heavy cavalry. Voland himself is kind of a typical leader of heavy cavalry stuff. He's kind of similar to like an Empire General or your mercenary generals, but with lower leadership. But yeah, he can lead some around. You get 1 per month, which is pretty good for decent quality heavy cavalry. And here are the Venators. So pretty exciting, although he is quite expensive in terms of his gold upkeep because you have to pay for those monthly reinforcements. But getting these guys early as heavy cavalry can be really nice. Moving on to the second set of Regiments of Renown, we have the Marksmen of Miragliano, led by Maximilian de Mark, just kind of a crossbow leader, pretty straightforward. The Marksmen of Miragliano themselves are just crossbowmen with high precision. Oh, and I should say how many they get per month. They get 2 marksmen per month. Then we have Braganza's Besiegers, which are, and it's another crossbow commander. You get 1 Pavis crossbowman per month. He comes with siege bonus and cast defense bonus, so that could be quite useful. Tilea is actually pretty good at doing sieges and defending its sieges because that's very much a feature of the warfare of within Tilea and mercenary Italy that they're based on. The Pavis crossbowmen are crossbowmen who are very slow, very, very, very slow, so they don't want to be fleeing or anything. They have a shield that's not particularly useful in close combat, but is fantastic at long range. So they are basically the kings of winning archer duels. They've got really good protection, particularly against missile fire, and they've got nice, relatively accurate crossbows. They also have cast defense bonus and siege bonus 2 built in, so they're good for sieging, as you would expect. Then we have Titchy Witchy's Skink Raiders. So they're riding around with their horned ones. If Titchy Witchy, he gets 1 Skink Raider cavalry per month. If Titchy Witchy or any of his Skink Raiders die, then you get to keep the horned one for that battle as a temporary shape. So the mount will fight on without the rider for a bit, but they're not fantastically strong. But these are kind of good, competent light cavalry you can use to attack rear. Then we have Prazzo's Lost Legion. Prazzo's Lost Legion get 1 reinforcement per month. They specialize in using a combination of crossbow and to fight at range and fighting in close. So they actually have this very interesting troop type, the Lost Legionnaire, that has both good protection, a pike, and a crossbow. A very odd combination, but they are very skilled in using that combination. Next up is the Manflayers, led by Malchus Manhide. These are basically Dark Elf Corsairs, so very good stats, pretty decent protection on Malchus at least, and he is a mage. So he can do a little bit of light thugging with these paths, I would think. He's got fear and a little bit of invulnerability, which means the protection against mundane is not bad. Also a tax collector and stealthy, so you can definitely do some raiding with these guys because he's got sailing, he can lead these troops around. You get 1 extra Manflayer Corsair per month, and this is the Manflayer Corsair, so pretty decent light infantry, stealthy. Good damage output, good stats, so they can do okay against PD and the like, but probably not last very long in a big battle. Then we have Lumpen Coop's Fighting Cocks. Here's Lumpen Croup. These are another unit of stealthy troops, but they have a very nice patrol bonus on the Ranger Captain. You get 2 Halfling Rangers per month, and you get quite a lot to start with because they're not super valuable units, but very high precision short bows. Not very exciting overall. I kind of not super happy when I get these guys, but of course, very high precision short bows can be useful against certain enemies, and if you have flaming arrows, they're pretty nice. So that's the Lumpenkrupps fighting cocks. Then we have Golgfag's Mercenary Ogres. Golgfag himself is a bit of a beast. He's got very good stats, unsurroundable, very, very tough indeed, all these survivals, and he is a tax collector as well, so you can send him off around raiding. He gets 1 extra Ogre Mercenary per month, which is why he's so expensive, because an Ogre Mercenary is very nasty. So let's have a look at the Ogre Mercenaries. Well, if you're familiar with the Ogre Kingdoms mod, you can tell that they are very similar to like Iron Fists, that kind of level. They don't have particularly amazing stats. They're a little bit clumsy, but they do have 2 attacks, Ogre Club and Axe. Or sorry, 3 attacks even. These guys are a little bit different from the other Ogres in that they have 2 weapons and an Ogre Smash. So excellent output of violence and very high protection, considering their high hit points. So the Golgfag Mercenary Ogre is one I'm always happy to get, really strong heavy infantry unit. Moving on to Regiments of Renown 3, we've got Al-Mukhtar's Desert Dogs. So here is Al-Mukhtar himself. You get 1 Nomad Cavalryman per month. He is sacred, Al-Mukhtar. These are pillagers, so maybe you could do a bit of pillaging with them. And you get the Arabian Nomad Cavalry. So these are what I would consider to be light cavalry with, light melee cavalry is not amazing in Dominions, but they can go and attack rear. That's basically what you would use them to do. Then we have another cavalry unit, the Hobgoblin Khan's. Is he called Hobgoblin Khan? No, Hobgoblin Khan is his boss. This is Ogla Khan. Yes, Ogla Khan is an exiled Khan of the Hobgoblin Steppe Empire. He is also stealthy. He is a hybrid short bow and falchion fighter. Not particularly great melee, but okay. You get 1 Hobgoblin Wolf Rider per month. The Hobgoblin Wolf Riders themselves are light lance and short bow guys, so okay hybrid cavalry, not amazing morale. They are stealthy. You can do typical light cavalry stuff with them. I wouldn't really have them just around to fire their short bows, but you can do that when the enemy's too tough for them to go and melee with. But generally, you want them to go and attack rear, get some archers, or try and kill some mages. Then we have Vespero's Vendetta, the duelists. So Vespero, the Maestro duelist, is a very nasty duelist. He is not an assassin, even though that's kind of what he would be doing in the lore, is kind of challenging people to duels and effectively assassinating them on the street. But he leads his regiment into light infantry into battle. You get 2 duelists per month. He is pretty nasty stats-wise, but I don't know how much you could thug with him really because of his not amazing built-in high hit points or anything like that. His stats are pretty good. He is very ambidextrous. And he has Vendetta duelists that work with him. So these are light infantry. They are bad formation fighters. They like to be spread out. And they will fight with throwing daggers, which are short-range throwing attacks, and a pair of weapons. So they are not the best light infantry in the world because of their low protection, but they have good stats. You can see their attack skill. They're launching at attack 13, so they will chop up not very well armored stuff very nicely. Vendetta, the Vespero's Vendetta. Then we have the Grudgebringer Cavalry. These are from the old Warhammer Shadow of the Horned Ret and Dark Omen games, if anyone remembers them. This was your main character, Morgan Bernhardt. His signature unit is the Grudgebringer Cavalry, and his mercenary unit in general are called the Grudgebringers. They're named after this magical sword he has, the Grudgebringer Sword, which is a very nice sword and allows him to cast fireballs. So that's what you'll have him doing in battle, is tossing out fireballs using this magic sword. But he's also an okay kind of thug level character and a pretty good leader. He has Inspirational 1 and Leadership 120, so he's kind of like a hero level leader. You get 1 Grudgebringer Cavalry extra per month, and the Grudgebringer Cavalry itself is basically medium melee cavalry. They don't use lances, they just charge into combat, and then they're fairly effective just fighting in close range with their swords. But yeah, pretty decent stats on them. And decent medium cavalry. So I like to get these guys early. Obviously, the commander himself is kind of more interesting than the cavalry he comes with, but they can equip themselves quite well. And now we have perhaps the most unusual, which is the Hengus, the Druid of Albion, and his Giants of Albion. So Hengus is a straightforward mage, pretty good paths. They're not something that you don't otherwise have access to. You do have access to these things. But he is a healer rather than just a disease healer, which you don't otherwise have access to. So having healer is very nice. And just having a mage from Regiment of Renown is cool. And he arrives with 2 Giants of Albion, and each turn has a 1 in 25 chance of getting an extra Giant of Albion. So he doesn't get the typical guaranteed monthly reinforcement, just a chance of getting some more of them. And the reason for that is because he's already a very good mage, and because the Giants of Albion themselves are pretty badass. They're very similar to the giants that other nations have, like the orcs and goblins have some, chaos dwarves have slave giants, ogres have slave giants. But these giants also throw boulders, which can be very nice. They have area effect, they do a lot of damage, as you can see. So you can use these as kind of artillery that are also very terrifying and powerful in melee. So it's really fun to get these guys. They're a little bit harder to use, and maybe you want to throw some buffs on them. But yeah, they can be really good, and it's really fun when you get the you get lucky on your rolls and get another one turning up for free as a monthly reinforcement. So that's all the Regiments of Renown. Let's look at an example of just recruiting a couple of regiments around just to see what it's like in the game. So I've just started a quick test game on the Silent Seas map, and I haven't paid too much attention to my scales or anything like that. I'm going to recruit on turn 1 a mercenary contact for 320 gold. So there we go. And let's see what we get. So our starting army is here. Unexpected event, Golgfag's Ogres. So that's a really cool one to get early on. I'm not usually that lucky. But Golgfag Maneater, here he is, and he comes with 10 Ogre Mercenaries, so definitely an entire and strong expansion force, and you'll get 1 extra per month. So we can send Golgfag off, conquering. Let us recruit another one. We can afford a second mercenary contract. Of course, by doing this, you're not then getting mages, and you don't know what you're going to get, so a bit of a gamble, but hopefully good fun for the player. So Golgfag went off and absolutely stomped this group, and you can see he had 10 Ogre Mercenaries, and I believe he now should have 11. One of them should have turned up. Yep, so he's got an extra one every turn, so this is going to become quite a steamrolling force. And then back in Tilea, we have Malchus Manhide's Manflayers have turned up, so that's pretty cool, because we've got this coastal start. And here we go, he comes with 13, unlucky for some, Manflayer Corsairs, and he will get an extra 1 per turn, so he could lead those around. You could, of course, always take them off and give them to another commander, but this is where more of them will appear. So, generally speaking, and because it's thematic, I like to keep them with their own commanders. I think that's more fun, and I typically have their own commanders go off and do a bit of fighting as well. But yeah, we've got Malchus Manhide. He can sneak off and do something. Let's send the Maneaters off doing something, and let's just recruit a third one just to see what it's like. Here's a third one. What do we get? We get Titchy Witchy, the Skink Raider Warchief. So how many of the Skink Raiders do we get with Titchy Witchy? We get 13, so the same number as we get with the Manflayers. They must be, in my mind at least, costed similarly. They do have... now where do we see their upkeep? There is a place where you can see their upkeep, isn't there? Morale, there we go. Yeah, they do have upkeep. All these mercenaries do, that's relatively high, and of course their leader has quite high upkeep, because they have that extra cost because they are summoning up a thing every turn. So once you've got a few regiments around, you may not find that you want to put more resources into it because you'll be happy with the ones you've got, but they can definitely help turbocharge your expansion and give you just an interesting and flavoursome set of different units and things. Tilea doesn't have any national spells, so there's nothing to talk about on that front. So let's have a quick look at the Pretender selection very briefly just to see what it's like. So we've got a decent selection of immobiles and a lot of titans. They're kind of a Greek and Italian, so you get these kind of classical titans, and some of these classical monsters as well, and then hags and great sages. So a pretty decent selection of pretenders there, mostly in the titan class. Finally, what kind of scales would I take with Tilea? Well, I think I would probably take Order, because you love to have the gold, although you don't necessarily need the extra recruitment points and them, or the extra resources, so, maybe you don't want to take that. I think I would probably take Magic to try and leverage my excellent magical diversity and okay research, but not having the sacred researchers. I don't know, maybe you'd want magic. I like luck and growth with Tylea. Growth particularly is good for keeping up with that long-term gold cost of having all that expensive mage core. Heat-wise, they are neutral, but you could take heat if you wanted to, or cold. People do tend to min-max it that way. Production-wise, I would probably go for Sloth, because if you're using Regiments of Renown, you don't have to worry about production. Resources don't mean anything in terms of recruiting troops, because your commanders will be recruiting monthly reinforcements as they go around, and every time you buy a Regiment of Renown, you don't have to pay all of that resource cost of those troops. So if you were kind of min-maxing a bit, maybe you would take I think you can expand okay using Regiments of Renown, so you don't really need an expander. So maybe you would take a caster who's able to cast various globals, because you do have good magic diversity, but you can't climb up very high in terms of your magical access, and you would want to really go for good gold income. So, this is a very extreme set of scales, but maybe something like this. Yeah, not very strong inclination towards any thematic scales, other than saying that it's probably Sloth. So that's everything I want to say about Tylea from an overview perspective. I hope that you will give them a try. I will put links to the mod in the description, and of course I will I always forget to do this, but I'll put a link to Discord where you can talk to me, give me feedback about the mod, ask me questions, or if you want to just say nice things about it. I always like to hear that. Yeah, I hope you have fun playing Tylea. I had a lot of fun making all the Regiments of Renown. They're for me like harkening back to kind of a golden age of Warhammer stuff in the 90s, where things had a good balance of like seriousness and silliness that I really enjoyed in that fantasy setting. Yeah, I think they're very colourful and characterful. So hope you enjoy. I will see you in further videos. Take it easy.